Thomas Kissinger here. Great to be with you as always. And we're going to start a new series. I'm really excited about this. It's called The Tension in Creation. This is a chapter out of the book written by Dr. Stephen Jones, Creation's Jubilee. And he devotes, as I said, a whole chapter to this topic, the tension in creation. So let's jump right on into this, get started, and then we'll obviously add some comments and thoughts along the way. We begin by quoting the Apostle Paul in his comment about the problem of creation in Romans 8:19 through 22. For the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing or the manifestation of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but because of him who subjected it in hope or expectation that the creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. What does this here tell us? Well, God has a plan. He planned this from the very beginning. God did not merely just react to the fall of man, but God had a plan, a higher intention, a purpose, and He put it into motion. And let's continue on here. Paul makes it clear that the creation had no choice in being subjected to futility and to slavery to corruption. Do you see that? All of these free moral agency people out there and these free will people that base all of their teaching on it's all about man's will and his free moral agency, this smashes it right from the very beginning that God has instituted this plan. He subjected the creation to vanity or futility or frustration or failure, not willingly, not according to our choice or according to our will. Are we in this situation, this tension in creation that we find ourselves in? It was done by the sovereign will of God alone. Futility, vanity, or emptiness describe a path that appears to go nowhere and has no purpose. When Adam sinned, his sin was imputed to all mankind. We all became liable for Adam's sin. And thus we are all mortal, paying for a sin which we did not commit. And not only mankind, but all of creation was subjected to this corruption. Have you ever stopped and thought about that? Yes, the scriptures say that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, but why? How? Because it goes back to Adam. We are born into the consequence of the sin of Adam. What is that consequence? Mortality. And because we're mortal, we sin. And because we sin, we die. It is contrary to the divine law for anyone to impute a father's sin upon the children. Deuteronomy 24:16 says, "Fathers shall not put to death for their sons, nor shall sons be put to death for their fathers. Everyone shall be put to death for his own sin." This law is repeated in Ezekiel 18:20, which says, "The person who sins will die. The son will not bear the punishment for the father's iniquity, nor will the father bear the punishment for the son's iniquity. The righteousness of the righteous will be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked will be upon himself." Children were not to be punished for the sins of their father. And yet this is precisely what God did with us. So what's going on? The fact that all of Adam's children are born mortal proves that we are paying for a sin committed by our father. Romans 5:12. Adam's children were put to death for the sin of their father, Adam. Did God not know that this was unjust? Of course he did. After all, he had prohibited such injustice by his own law revealed to Moses and confirmed by Ezekiel. This raises the most basic question about the justice of God. Death was imposed upon us outside our will, and this is the root cause of all personal sins committed after Adam's original sin. We are being held liable for a sin of our father, Adam. We cannot hide this issue and hope it goes unnoticed by God's critics. Nor can we theologize it away after God clearly takes the credit for holding us liable. In dealing with this problem, we must first know that God is just and have faith that He knows what He's doing. We must align ourselves with His plan rather than attempt to alter His plan to fit what we think He should have done. So we've got a dilemma here. We've got a tension that needs to be resolved. We have a problem. We have a conundrum. Let's press further into it. In looking at the way God imputed Adam's sin to his descendants and the divine law which prohibits such behavior, we do not hesitate to call God's action a temporary injustice. Wow. Which is the direct cause of the tension in the history of creation. Tension is the result of injustice or disharmony while it is yet unresolved. It has many implications. When a nation wrongs another, tension is set up, often leading to war. When an individual wrongs another, tension is in the air until restitution is made. Tension always demands a resolution. So Dr. Stephen Jones outlines for us there and drops the big bomb on us that God has subjected us to temporary injustice. Why? What's the reason? What's the purpose? Let's continue on. In music, there are certain chords which contain conflicting or discordant notes. These chords set up an emotional tension until the chord is resolved. This is a very common musical technique used to play upon the emotions of the listener and draw him into the music by forcing him psychologically to demand harmony. Discord torments the mind of the musician in order to maximize the feeling of relief when the harmonious chord is struck and the tension resolved. It is much like the cliffhangers in books or television programs. All are temporary tensions designed to make the listeners demand a resolution. God, too, has employed this technique in the music of the spheres and in the book of history. Imputing death and corruption to mankind and to creation in general has produced a judicial tension that demands resolution. Paul says that God certainly will not leave creation hanging. The disharmony and injustice is only temporary. There's the big word, temporary. Temporary injustice. Temporary situation that God has put the creation in for a very specific and grand purpose at the end. In fact, Paul says that the injustice that caused the tension will be more than compensated when the final chord of history is struck. And so Paul reminds us in Romans 8:18, I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed in us. And again he says in 2 Corinthians 4:17, for momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. Well, there you go. There's a very short explanation of it right there. We've been subjected to vanity not willingly. Why? Because it's producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. Paul is reminding us that the injustices of life are not only temporary, but will be more than righted at the last day when he restores all things. So we have this grand statement that God has subjected the creation to vanity not willingly. First, we need to see this. We need to see this temporary injustice, this subjecting to vanity not willingly, not of our own choice. But then we need to see that God is the author of it. God has a designed plan that He's bringing about. As it mentioned earlier in that passage, the whole creation is waiting for this manifestation of the sons of God to take place. And this is the first part of God's plan of His great harvest, the first fruits or the overcomers that are going to come forth and then play a part in delivering the rest of the creation from this bondage, this corruption, this vanity, futility, failure or frustration that we find ourselves in. But we are told that our latter end is going to be greater than our former. And that all of this that's taking place, this designed plan by God, not only is it temporary, but it's going to produce for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. How exciting! Stay with me on this journey as we go through the tension in creation.